Hey, what's on the other side of your mind? What's on the other side of your mind? Hi, this is Michael Shevack, and welcome to Godsearch. The purpose of being here? Well, for you to have that experience called God. We don't know whether God exists. People have their opinions. They believe in it with all their life, with all their heart. They'll bleed for it. But what we do know, and it's across the board in all of the spiritual literature of all the good and noble religions out there, that there is an experience of truth, an experience of unity, and an experience of goodness. And if you put them all together, it's an experience that we can call God. How do you get there? That's the journey. That's the search. And you're on a God search. If you're already alive, you're on a God search. On the last podcast, I talked a little bit about transcendental meditation, which was a very pivotal transition for me. I was an atheist. I was raised by atheists. Everything was rational. Everything was logical. Everything was systematic thinking, scientific thinking, engineering-like thinking. And through the transcendental meditation movement and their introduction to mantra, their mantra meditation form, I began to have remarkable, even mystical experiences that opened me up to the obvious fact that my rationality, my sense of reason was, well, it was a species of reason. There were more advanced reasons and more advanced and more evolved understandings than I had currently had. Well, that opened me up to many, many experiences, but it gave me a central understanding, which I would like to share with you. You know, many, many times we'll have a need in life, and we'll have a thought in life for something that we desire or need. Sometimes desires are the same as needs, and sometimes needs are separate from desires. But basically, when we feel that there's something we need, it's a strong desire. And in fact, it may be a very critical piece of a puzzle to bring you into the complete, full expression of your potential. Anyway, who we are, let me strip everything away. Who we are basically is some kind of very unusual entity. And we can feel. We can have a feeling, an awareness, and a sense of something. And then sometimes we can get a feeling and a sense of something we need, right? And then we'll have a desire or feelings which are nondescript. We just kind of are feeling. It's like we're floating in water. And then all of a sudden, we get a little bubble that comes up, and it's like a desire. And then that desire gets fed somehow. It gets watered, and it begins to grow like a little tiny plant. And that desire will go from feeling to a thought, to a feeling to a desire, to a thought, which has a deeper sense of feeling, to a more advanced thought, which has an even deeper sense of feeling. And it will progress until it becomes an organic response. You can feel it, not just sense it in your mind or your awareness. It feels like it's a part of your body. It feels a part of your organics. And you can begin to feel it and hunger for it. A lot like food. Food can start, you're in this nether zone where you're not feeling anything, and all of a sudden you begin to get a desire for, you know, a milkshake. And then you begin to visualize that it is chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry. And then the feeling becomes deeper. And then you begin to put more dimension on it. Where am I going to get the milkshake from? Do I want, one with malt in it? Do I want one without malt in it? And the feelings even deeper and get even deeper until you begin to get a bodily sensation where you can feel a bodily hunger for that milkshake begin to get amplified until it becomes a hunger and a bodily impulse. And then these feelings and these thoughts become actions that you have to now interact with the world in order to obtain that milkshake. Every single thing that human beings do is a continuum of feelings to desires, to thoughts, to more feelings, to deeper thoughts, to deeper feelings, entrance into the physical body, amplification by the physical body, until it becomes an organic hunger and an organic need. As you begin to connect to these kind of transcendent aspects of the human being, and I do highly recommend transcendental meditation as a very quick way to get there. It's best, if you're interested in speed, it's a very, very speedy form of meditation. It does not clog you up. It's very easy. But as you connect to these transcendent things, you begin to notice that every single human being on the other side of their mind, on the other side of their personal mind, really is a cosmos. We're really a cosmos that is desiring and amplifying its own feelings into thoughts with deeper feelings, creating galaxies and planets and life upon it, which is capable of being self-aware and have feelings and then desires and then thoughts amplifying feelings and feelings amplifying thoughts until an organic entity actually can hunger for something and go out there and either find it natively on the planet or manufacture itself from the actual materials here. Everything in that sense is a cosmic act. The simplest human desire is a cosmic act that takes place through you. Now, of course, we don't have to consider consciously what's on the other side of the cosmos. Some galaxy, some planet there, but it's all part of the same, what we call universe that we share. The important thing is that as you begin to connect to the other side of your mind, and again, I recommend the transcendental meditation technique. It's a very easy way to do it. There are other techniques. We can talk about that in a little bit. What will happen is you begin to understand that you yourself are connected to that creative mind that might be called the mind of God. Some people might call it the cosmos. Some people might call it the universe, or if there's multiple universes, a universe of universes. There are many, many descriptors for that. And these are all things that can be discussed. They have merits to some of them. There are demerits to some of them. They all have advantages and disadvantages to trying to explain something that is very difficult to explain because it just is there. But as you begin to touch the other side of your mind through meditation, you begin to notice that you are an instrument by which all creation, that's a term I particularly like because I'm Jewish and it's part of my religious heritage, that all of creation is alive and breathing and living and creative through you. Any desire you have, whether it is an organic desire as a human being who has a body on the planet, or whether it's a creative supernatural human being, meaning we have creativity that is not restricted to earthly nature. These are all aspects of a self-aware, extraordinary, living, breathing universe, a living, breathing eternity, a living, breathing God that acts through us. B'Tselem v'Demut, in the image and likeness of God, we are reflective of the nature of God, and we are in an individual form that distinguishes us as a separate entity. We are a separate entity at the same time as we are connected. And this is what happens when you begin a meditative experience to get to the other side of mind. Now, are we really truly getting to the other side of mind? Well, some people would say no, because we're just leaving the markers that we have that we usually attach to the word mind, such as thought or desire or a particular feeling for a certain object. We're transcending a particular desire, and we're moving beyond that to some kind of sense of mind that is not attached to feelings or thoughts. That's a perfectly good critique. And many, many people would say, well, you're not really moving to the other side of mind. You're just moving away from thought and feeling, which is somewhat true, but you'll notice that there is a sense of feeling and there is a sense of an awareness of thought, even if there is no formed thought for the purpose of desiring itself. But I would say this is that you are moving to the other side of the common everyday linked to goal-focused actions that your mind usually is, absorbed by, if not obsessed by. You're moving to kind of what has been called a field. Sufis are very, very proud of that kind of language where they talk about moving to a field that is beyond thought. It's kind of like an electromagnetic field before you have magnets and before you have electrons or electricity. It's the field from which the electrons spring or from which magnetons would spring. Right? This kind of field theory, by the way, which is very ancient, it's thousands upon thousands of years old and speculative religious thinking, is very commonplace now, ever since Maxwell's equations. And then Einstein drew upon Maxwell's equations to create special relativity and then general relativity. And now field theory is very, very much how mathematicians and physicists go towards describing things that are interconnected and yet part of the same fabric. Yeah. Through the TM movement, I was able to access a kind of field of consciousness that was prior to anything that I could enunciate. And there were moments in that form of meditation where it was as if I was floating in a womb. I woke up from those states shocked because I had an awareness that I could associate with a fetus. I mean, I can imagine myself as a fetus floating in my mother's womb and not being able to really have thought in the sense of, hey, I'd like to get a convertible and start driving my car, but just a kind of awareness of being, an awareness of growing, but not related to anything that was a material thought. And it was a very strange experience when it first began to happen. And as it developed and as I was able to hold the experience and prolong the experience and learn some of the interdimensionality of the experience, because there are eddies and currents and fluid motions that take place in the experience, I began to realize, in fact, that to say we're spiritual beings, that's not just a word. That's not a word. Okay? It actually describes the real entity of being spiritual beings that we are, meaning on the other side of our mind, where we can't identify a thought, where we can't identify a directed feeling, is a sense of self where you are present, but you're not an ego. Your material ego is secondary, but there's a sense of a self that is greater than you, and you know yourself to be, but you are not being simply you. Very hard language. Some people say it's the drop that becomes aware of it being the ocean, or the ocean is a drop. That's a nice metaphor, but it doesn't explain the sensation, because in fact a drop is different than an ocean. A drop has different hydrostatic forces that allow it to be a drop, and there are different relationships in the drop than there are that are in the ocean. They are configured differently. So that kind of really profound and well-used mystical analogy doesn't hold for me. It's a sense of a self that is connected to a wider self, and a wider self that has configured itself in my individual self. It is both what's been called the macrocosm and the microcosm. I would call it God and a human being. The spirit beyond everything, and the spirit as reflective in the human individual ego. Anyway, however you describe it, I would recommend on your God search, through any means that you're attracted to, of seeking out that knowledge and awareness that is on the other side of your standard mind. Now, why? Well, once you introduce that level of consciousness in a very solid way, and we referenced this in earlier podcasts, what you now have is you have another authority. You have another authority that you can appeal to when you have conflicts between one side of your mind and another side of your mind. There is another wholeness that is beyond either polarity that you can draw upon. This is the source of what's called prophetic inspiration, knowledge that comes from a higher source, inspiration, revelation, in fact, where you receive inspired ideas from something that's beyond the ordinary thinking process. Many, many times, for instance, in the difference between Newtonian and Einstein's physics, there was a conflict between um, between um, witnessing the laws of the universe on different parts of the universe and adjusting for the speed of light, because the speed of light would connect these things, and you'd have to be able to witness the laws of the universe in two places simultaneously in a way that the laws of the universe would stay the same. And there was a conflict that took place, which required Einstein to reconfigure the notion of time, which Newton had held to be everywhere the same. It's like a rug that ran hypostatically under everything. That had to change. Now, there is a need for inspiration when we're using the ordinary side of our mind. And what happens is if you can learn how to meditate and transcend the everyday thinking process and move to a field from which originates feeling and desire and thought and more feeling, and brings it through the organics of our planetary bodies, if you can draw from that point, you have an opportunity to bring down new knowledge, more advanced knowledge, more holistic knowledge, more unified knowledge that will allow you to solve problems in a way that doesn't require conflict, doesn't require wars, doesn't require academic debates, and doesn't require people who have their opinion fighting your opinion, and I'm going to prove I'm right, you're going to prove you're wrong, and all of this academic gymnastics, which is nothing more than a form of competition and competing warriors, disguised as academic search for knowledge. Nonetheless, it's your standard pissing contest as men. So being able to access a more refined awareness on the other side of your mind is what's needed to increase the amount of inspired thinking that our world needs to solve a lot of its problems. If we can get there more readily and connect to it, we can draw it down and bring it into our everyday thinking. Now, here, this is where religions can be very, very valuable. If you are opening up to that kind of knowledge, that is a pool of knowledge and you can get a lot of inspirations. But as everyone knows down on earth, we are creatures of habits. We have habits on how we act. We have habits on how we go about eating. We may have habits like smoking. We may have habits of how we eat or how we sleep and when we eat. And oftentimes, if we get inspired ideas that descend down into our organic structures, we can't readily open something as solid as our body, because it is solid to us as egos. And what happens is this knowledge doesn't always get into the earth plane, which is your body, as readily as it could. So imagine you have all of this knowledge in the cosmos that is trying to get to the earth, and it gets to the earth through living creatures because we are of the earth. And this higher knowledge needs to penetrate into the deeper levels of the earth, which it does so by entering into our physical bodies, which when we die go back into the planet, and bring this knowledge through our physical bodies back into the earth, which then evolves more advanced forms of life. And you have a continual experience of information downloading, which is another way of saying evolution. Information downloading, which produces new forms of knowledge and new forms of life to embody it, and enhances the entire evolution of the entire planet and its geology. And this is really how things happen. You, as a God searcher, are the number one single most important entity for bringing illumination to this earth. You have direct access as a supernatural animal to sources of knowledge on the other side of the mind. Now, transcendental meditation did it for me. I could not find it then in my own literature as a Jew. Oh, it was there, but I couldn't find it. I was so blinded by my own intellectual arrogance and confusion, I couldn't see it. Once I had a taste of it, I was able to find it in my own literature. But once I had a taste of it in general, I was able to find it in other literature as well. So the whole idea, for instance, of Jesus ascending so that he is consubstantial with God the Father, meaning the creator of our world, is a way of saying that the human consciousness and God's consciousness can interlace and become aware of each other so that earthly life and earthly material bodies can become impregnated with knowledge of God. If you're Christian, you might call that the incarnation of God. It's there through TM. It's there through the idea of the one God who is the creator, and human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. It is there in in Christianity. It is there in Buddhism with a kind of caveat where you be very, very careful lest you believe that you are capable of framing any particular deity in your mind. Why? Because if you can frame a deity in your mind, you're leaving the other side of your mind and you're coming back to the more earthly kind of mind, which is organized by thinking process and by directed feelings and thoughts and desires. So they're very careful to not confuse any thought that you might have of that field, any thought of that field as the actual field itself. And that's a very beautiful idea. It is limited because you can create kind of symbolic language that is so rarefied and so distinguished from ordinary earthly thinking through mathematics that you can actually describe it in very real terms and very predictable terms so that you can use many of these forces that in the ancient world were considered to be angelic forces. You can actually use them and put them to human tasks. Getting to the other side of the mind is the solution to inspired ideas that can solve our problems with ecology, solve our problems in our social orders, solve our problems on the correct use of economics, solve our interpersonal problems, our male and female problems. We have to get to the other side of our mind. Why? Because it is not human thought. It is not our society's thoughts. It is not our religious thoughts. It is not anyone's thoughts that determine the capacity for thought itself. The capacity for thought comes from a miraculous kind of, I don't know, miraculous kind of field. It's a great word, where they spring from it. It's kind of the nature of life to be able to have creative launches, that spring forth and gush up with new creative ideas and new things that have never existed before, whether they're new species or whether they're species that come up with their own creative ideas, such as artificial computers and artificial life forms. So getting to the other side of mind is the number one task of all religions. It also must be the number one task in all secular teachings as well. There is a humility that is required. We talked about it in the first Godsearch, a humility that one cannot fully encapsulate all understandings in any discipline. That if we're seeking unity of all human beings and unity of all existence, and we're seeking to have a full idea of that puzzle where all of these pieces fit together, we have to know from the very beginning that we are limited in what we can formulate. Going to the other side of mind and realizing that there is a vast field there that is so unimaginably huge that we ourselves cannot fully represent it is a way of bringing the world together in humility, where each of us knows we are humbly mortal, humbly uneducated, humbly unable to comprehend things completely. What unifies us is our ability to admit we're imperfect. What unifies us is our ability to admit we are inadequate, mortal, imperfect, merely a creature who is, however smart we are, and human beings are pretty smart, we're simply growing and learning. By the way, go to yourgodsearch.com and please write in. A lot of people are doing it. And ask your questions, because these are the critical questions that we need in 2026 if we're going to get past all the polarized thinking between the red team and the blue team and all this kind of stuff. We've got to be building our belief systems not on opinions and what I call an opinionocracy, but on true knowledge that proceeds from a source of knowledge that is greater than any particular human being, greater than any particular religion or revelation, a source which is unframeable in its totality by any one human being and unfulfillable by any one mere human being. This humility is what we need if we're going to bring us together as people, as a nation, and as a world. If we each of us think that we know more than everyone else, well, we've already divided the world. The beautiful thing about getting to the other side of mind, and I do hope you have that experience, is you will realize how simultaneously special you are and how simultaneously small you are. You'll realize the greatness of who you are and the tininess of who you are at the exact same time. It's an incomprehensible contradiction. It's a sublime contradiction. Both the smallness and the greatness, the micro and the macro, all of these things you begin to come to awareness of when you move from the side of your mind that deals with the everyday, goal-oriented, task-oriented, desire-oriented forms of human hungers. And you move to the other side of your mind, which is full, resplendent, inspired, living, nonstop, creative, imaginative, and beyond anything that your mind is capable of containing 100%, though you yourself are a full participant in what it does create. And you are a full instrument by which it does continue to create and continues to create on the most intimate of levels possible, which is your own uniqueness as an ego. An ego. It's beautiful. And I encourage you through whatever spiritual discipline you are engaged in, whether it is philosophical speculation, which is whether it is music or art, to seek the hidden source that is underneath the creativity by which the creativity is inspired, like an artist who draws a brushstroke and pauses and waits for the next feeling to move through them before they take another brushstroke, which could be in the opposite side of the canvas, but somehow they come together. It's in between those pauses when that field, which is beyond the everyday side of the mind, begins to intrude and communicate to us and take us over and move us towards doing even greater good than we ourselves can imagine with our mortal mind. It's inspired thought, it's inspired technology, and it is the solution to a glorious human life, but it's a spiritual solution and requires a God search. So if you're feeling sad and wondering what's happening to the world, there's plenty of reasons out there why. I'm going to encourage you that your God search is not just a pie in the sky, airy-fairy kind of thing that doesn't have anything to do with the price of beans or everyday life. I'm going to say just the opposite. Your God search is your personal opening to the unity, the goodness, and the truth, and the effective use of your creativity so that you can not only improve your own personal life, but every single life of every person you come in contact with in your family, in your nation, in your world. We need you. Get on that God search. Get out there. Discover the God that is waiting on the inside of you and is waiting to communicate with you and transform your own life, your own creativities. Take your feelings and your desires and your thoughts and your deeper feelings and your deeper thoughts and bring it through your body and create wonders for yourself personally and for our entire world and planet. It's a great task, and once you're living it, you'll never be bored again. It's the most entertaining thing you can do. Never a dull day when you're on a God search. So thanks for joining me. Again, this is Michael Shevack. Welcome to Godsearch, encouraging you to get on the other side of your mind and uncover God, discover God, and for heaven's sakes, recover God if you've been lost in the everyday side of the mind, so much so that you fail to see the beauty and the scintillating excitement of being able to connect to the very source of creativity, without which you would be a mere ordinary animal, when in fact you are a supernatural being from the time you were born. Enjoy yourself. See you next week about 5:45 a.m. Eastern Daytime. God bless. Bye-bye.